All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. The Our Driving Concern Employer Traffic Safety Program is pleased to be able to offer the webinar, Steps to Creating a Traffic Culture. I want to welcome our presenters this morning, Lisa Robinson and Cindy Leonard. Lisa is our Senior Program Manager with Our Driving Concern, and Cindy is the Program Manager with Our Driving Concern. A few things to note before we get started. If you joined us via phone, please press *6 to ensure your phone is muted. This will minimize background noise and ensure sound quality. This is a listen-only webinar, and you do have the ability to type questions during the webinar using the chat function anytime during the webinar. Questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. If you should encounter any problems or issues, please type a message in the chat function to let us know, or you can email me at vina.anderson@nsc.org. The presenter's contact information will be available on the last slide. There is a very brief post-event survey at the conclusion of the webinar because this program is funded through grant dollars and provided at no cost to employers. We would greatly appreciate your feedback. With that, I welcome Lisa and Cindy, and we'll turn it over to them to begin.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, everyone. Are you going to
kick us off?
Webinar?
No, why don't you kick us off, Cindy?
I'm ready. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for your patience while we navigated through some of our technical issues this morning. You know, we've been running quite a few webinars lately, and we are glad to say that we're halfway through the month of April, which may be one of the longest months in the history of the world. As you know, we've been trying to step up and give you some more webinar opportunities, as we know a lot of you have altered your work schedules. Some of the upcoming trainings as well as webinars that we still have available on our schedule are listed here, and we'll be adding to this list in May as well. So we look forward to having you with us this morning and having you with us in the weeks and days to come. Here we go. And so we're going to be talking today about safety culture. And Lisa, this is one of our favorite topics, wouldn't you say?
It is. You know, without us, we talk a lot about transportation, but if you don't have a successful or a winning safety culture, it really doesn't matter. You can do everything under the sun, but if it's not successful, it's really not going to matter. You can take all the training, you can learn all the principles, but it's a key component, and I think the biggest part is the winning and the successful component. Wouldn't you agree, Cindy?
Absolutely, absolutely.
I want to kick it off by, reminding a quote from Robert Campbell. He was the first president for the National Safety Council, and he was a safety pioneer. And I think his all-encompassing, statement of the safety work of today affects every relationship that we have. It enters into the home, into our social life, into our business life, and into every economic situation that we have. And I think that was true in 1914, and it's true in 2020. And so to kick us off, let's talk a little bit about culture. Let's talk about what exactly is culture? What's the big deal? Why do we care about transportation safety, right? Well, who's responsible? Are we all going to point fingers and say, well, it's not me, not I, right? We all have that person living at our home, correct? But what about occupationally? And how is management, and how do we engage them? Because they are the decision makers a lot of times. And so how are we going to get them to be a part of the solution? So let's get started right away, and let's talk about, are you compliant, right? Are you compliant? Are you safe? Maybe you're compliant and you're doing everything that you know you need to do to be compliant, and you're following every rule. But my question is, are you safe? Does that mean because you're compliant that you're actually 100% safe, right? So let's see, what drives you, right? Does the bottom line drive you? What's our why? Well, our why, we know, is when it comes to occupationally, the bottom line drives an employer. And occupationally, every decision that is made in that company financially is always going to be a piece of that discussion. Money always comes into, are we able to do this? Is this achievable? And it's always going to be, what's the cost? So that's one of the whys. The other why is the safety, okay? Because safety is a key component. Our goal is that everyone goes to work safely and leaves safely. So what's the difference in reaction and prevention, okay? what is actually the difference? Reaction is like, for example, waiting for the hurricane. You assume that things are going to happen and there's nothing that can be done to prevent it, right? That's reactionary. The prevention approach, when that hurricane is coming, right, you're boarding up your home and protecting the family. So it's a proactive approach. It's a preventative approach. You know, a lot of companies tend to be very reactionary instead of preventive. And we know that prevention is extremely key and it's an important component. So that's where the difference of incident management versus risk management comes in. And I had a company one time tell me that they were constantly chasing all the incidents. They got tired of chasing all of the incidents, that they felt like so that meant they were reactionary. They were constantly chasing after an incident instead of trying to be on the front end of it. And it's taken them a little while, but they have found great success. One of the measures they had started was they had put some drive cams in the vehicle so they could see what was going on, and right away they could tell what some of the issues were. And so that allowed them to know that they needed to make a difference. And, you know, it may seem tedious, but it's extremely profitable to look at prevention as a component. So let's talk about culture a little bit, right? You know, safety culture refers to the ways that safety issues are addressed in the workplace, right? Safety is a key component, but what's the culture look like, right? What is your culture like? It reflects the attitudes, the beliefs, the perceptions, and the values that employees share in relationship to safety. In other words, it's the way we do safety. How do you do safety? What is your culture? What's the culture say about your company? Cindy, can you move for me? Move the slide for me. So as I mentioned, that these are three components within safety that we talk about. And so what about it? Is it a priority, right? Is safety a priority at your company? What you need to know that safety is a non-negotiable core value. Safety is something, it's non-negotiable, right? It's not just a priority, it's a non-negotiable core value. And I have a lot of people tell me in industry that sometimes it's viewed that safety can't live in a world of profitability. And I say that's not true. It's a non-negotiable core value. And I think that's an important component. So, Cindy, I'm going to turn it over to you to a little bit talk about transportation for a minute.
Sure thing. And, you know, picking up on what some of the points are that Lisa has made, too, when you have a strong safety culture, particularly with transportation safety culture, what you're going to see is that your drivers and your employees are going to be practicing safe measures, whether you're watching or not. And that's a really key component for a safety supervisor. You know, a safety supervisor who knows that the minute he walks onto the scene, people start straightening up and figuring out what they're not doing right and putting on their hard hats and that kind of thing. That's an example of what a safety culture that isn't strong would look like. You want to emulate by sharing, by modeling the things that you know are safest by practice, so that those that work with you are also following those things. And you also want to encourage peer-to-peer relations that will show that people are feeling accountable for each other. One really good example that we talk about a lot is wearing seatbelts. You know, we have a lot of white fleet trucks now that have back seats. And if we have workers riding along in the back seat, are they buckling up every time? Is somebody making sure that they buckle up before that car or truck is in motion? Is there peer-to-peer accountability on the job as well as when a supervisor is present? And that's really a very important reason why we want transportation safety culture as part of your workplace. And the reasons are pretty obvious, but we'll just go through them real quickly. To save lives, to reduce the risk of life-altering injuries, absolutely. This is the goal for every safety manager, every risk manager, every human resource leader. You're protecting your human and your financial resources. Your people are your most important resource, right? And so these safety measures are helping you protect them. And then you're also guarding against liability issues. So those are some of the big deals. And when it all translates down, employers exceed $9.25 billion each year in costs due to transportation incidents. And we know that a lot of those incidents could be avoided. So what about your employees that aren't driving professionally for you? You know that they're driving to and from work. You know that they're driving as part of their job. Some of them are running errands for you. They're leaving at lunch. You know, the lunch time period is one of the most dangerous in terms of number of incidents that occur. So we know that a lot of people are getting in and out of their vehicles more than once a day, and they're doing it occupationally, whether they're driving professionally for you or not. And again, we go back to those costs. We're looking at billions of dollars in injuries, fatalities, lost work days, lost productivity. And one of the important measures that occurs when you have a strong safety culture is that your drivers are being safe while they're on the job as well as beyond the job. We know that they don't take a back seat at 5 o'clock when they clock out and suddenly decide that safety is not an issue for them anymore. We know that they reflect the things that you have brought to their awareness throughout their day, throughout their personal and professional life driving. And back to those human errors, 90% of all of our crashes occur due to human error. Now, if you think about that for a minute, that involves some really key behaviors that we talk about in our transportation training. And I hope that you'll join us next time we have that. It occurs, I believe, May 28th. I'm not looking at the schedule right now, but May 28th, I believe, is the date that we have our next occupational transportation training.
Right.
And that's a very good opportunity for you to look at the 5 key behaviors that we discussed that attribute to the crash rates and how to avoid those. So, Lisa, I'm going to turn it back over to you now to talk a little bit about driver training and communication.
Okay. You know what? Driver training and communication, it's got to be continuous. You know, it's got to be something that you decide is not a one and done. It's an ongoing conversation. And Cindy, can you go ahead and move the slide forward for me a little bit so the bullets will show up? It's got to be continuous. It's got to be ongoing. And it's got to be 100% of your workforce. You know, Cindy made a comment that was really good a minute ago, and she did talk very clearly about those employees who are running errands, the employee that's going to lunch. Sometimes what happens is we determine that the only people that are going to get training are the ones who actually drive every single day for us, right? And sometimes we think, okay, I'm going to do it when they're first hired, so they've had their training. That is not going to be enough for you to mitigate and to have a really strong safety culture. So it's got to be a continuous and ongoing. And Cindy, before I go on, I'm going to ask you real quick to come in here in this slide, and I want you to tell for just a little bit about some of the things that with our driving concern, that when we talk about the continuous and ongoing, you talked a little bit about some of the training opportunities and how, you know, sometimes we have people that will come to these trainings more than once because they'll hear something the first time, the second time they come back they hear something else, and then the third time we might have updated and they've gotten something else. So can you tell me a few things, some of the examples that you have shared before about how people have taken some tools and they've infused those into their daily safety? Can you share a couple best practices?
Absolutely, Lisa, I'd be glad to. And, you know, our training we think of as almost the beginning, if you will, of the ongoing resources that we can help you provide with your employees. So we start with the training, and we cover those 5 basic behavioral issues that come into play that cause the most crashes. Okay, and those are things that you're going to be familiar with: distraction, impairment, aggressive driving, which includes speeding. We know speeding is definitely on our radar, especially these days. Wearing seatbelts, and then finally fatigue and fatigue issues. We cover those in the training, but then we also cover them pretty extensively in an ongoing way through our website and through our social media platforms. We are on Twitter, we are on Instagram, we are on Facebook, and we are on LinkedIn, and I think I covered all of them. But within our website, we have Live with Lisa videos that are about 60 seconds long that can be a quick PSA at the top of a safety meeting. We also have safety huddles. We have webinars that are recorded, like this one will show up on the website in about 24 hours. And so if there's a topic that's related to your transportation needs, we are covering it or trying to cover it on the website. If we don't have it on the website, then this is an opportunity for you to give us that feedback and let us know what we can do to help you. Our bottom line goal is to supply you with resources that you can take and run with. So if there's a topic that you need, we'll develop it. we'll give you a tool to use with that, and then we'll provide it for everybody else on the online resources as well, and make it something that's valuable for employers in lots of different settings. Did I skip anything, Lisa?
No, not at all. You covered it. Thank you so much for that, Cindy. I was really glad. You know, one thing I would like you to mention, could you, actually do, tell me a little bit about the safety coach cards. Did you really say about how taking those and sharing them, like a safety leader would take them and each group would do them and things like that? Did you
Sure, Lisa. So let me back up and explain what safety coach cards are. Safety coach cards are a set of flashcards, if you will, with a question on one side and answer on the back. And we cover them topically. So the 5 behaviors that we talk about are covered and color-coded through those flashcards, if you will. They're available to print out and download from the website. So you can use them without actually cutting them out into cards. But if you want to do some of the things that we know that have worked in best practices with other employers, we know they've been used as Trivial Pursuit cards. We know that they've been used in scavenger hunts for safety fairs with family members as well. And we know one of the simplest ways is to provide a couple of those cards to each of your driving supervisors. And by giving them the same cards every week, then they are providing the same question and answer and the same conversational topics with their employees all at the same time. So you're creating a really strong culture when everybody's dialing into the same conversation and making the same awareness through those cards at the same time.
Good point, Cindy. Thank you for sharing about that. I know that we've had a lot of people that have just really enjoyed that because it's that quick 2-minute conversation, and they want to make that consistent and ongoing, and that's a great way, an easy way to do it.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about the value of safety. You know, I think this might be, you know, and I like to talk about some of the keys because, I mean, we can talk all day long about transportation safety. We can talk all day long about safety. We can talk all day long about culture. But again, if you're not efficient, you're not effective, and you're not engaging, you will not be able to be successful. And I think those are really important because why do it otherwise? You know, just to say that you have a safety culture and just to say you have a safety manual and just to say we have policy. Is it efficient? Is it effective? And is it engaging? And engaging is one of those pieces where I said it's got to be that consistent and that ongoing component in there. And to be effective, you're going to see how's your culture, right? A couple other things that are really important about the leaders, because I recently did a pre-conference and I was talking about safety and how things are set up and how things are determined. And I had several people indicate that at the very top, things are pushed down, and that's the way it is. And so culture is influenced by our leaders at all levels. So again, our culture is definitely influenced by our leaders. And safety professionals need to be able to advise those leaders. It's really important that you can communicate. And another thing that you've got to understand is you need to listen to your employees. What do they have to tell you, right? And you need to monitor what's working and what's not. Another thing I have to say is lead by example. And we have a lot of people saying, do as I say, not as I do. And that is not the way to be the most successful. Because I know, for an example, where leaders have actually been killed in an incident, and they're a leader, and they'd sat through multiple safety talks. And I said, you know, if this person was a leader and a supervisor, and they died in a crash because they were unseat belted, right? They were unbelted. They were not buckled in. They've affected everybody underneath them, every employee underneath them, because they're a supervisor and everyone saw it. Then the next thing is if they didn't follow that policy, they may not have followed other policies because they didn't find them important. So it's really important that if you're leading by an example, that your culture is strong and that everybody understands that, you know what, we are all a part of the solution and we're all a part of the success. So it's important that we've got all levels of management, whether we talk supervisors, upper, middle, all employees are participating, right? Because if employees see that other people aren't, why are they going to do it, right? And your program's got to be a little flexible, right? We heard that last week whenever we were on a culture webinar recently where we talked about safety right now in the COVID era, and it talks about being nimble and being flexible, right? It's really important that you have to have a program that is also very positive. It's got to be perceived as positive by all the employees, right? And again, What's a winning culture? What's a winning culture going to have? It's got to have a written plan, right? You have to have something that you can go by. You can't just make it up as you go. You got to have a plan. And again, every level, all your supervisors, all your leaders, all your employees. But another thing is the expectations must be clear. If you're not able to communicate it, it's not accessible, and it's sitting on a shelf gathering dust, that is not going to be effective. So you have to know why you're doing it, and you've got to be able to have this culture that everybody's on board, everyone knows what it is, and it's extremely clear. That's an extremely important part. But what about that plan, right? What do you have in place? Another piece is evaluation. Cindy, are we ever going to do programs and never look at evaluation, or do we look at our evaluations to determine what do we need to modify? Do we do that
Absolutely.
Probably after every training, Cindy?
You know, we see evaluation as part of the middle of the process rather than the final grade. We see evaluations as something that we can use to continually add to and enhance what we're doing. And we've operated that way since the start, wouldn't you say, Lisa?
Absolutely. It's the only way that you are successful. And, you know, it's one of the most important pieces because sometimes what happens is what we'll see is somebody will say, this is how we're going to do it. This is how it's done. But they aren't nimble. They're not flexible. And they haven't thought about along the way, are we able to attain it, right? So how can we engage management? Because I just already told you all levels of management are important. It's got to start with your culture. You've got to make sure that they're a part of that culture, right? Your culture is influenced by those leaders. You've got to be able to communicate with them. They've got to be involved. It's an important component because if they're not involved, they don't know what decisions that they're making. And you know what? They need the statistics and the data. How can we communicate, educate, and give them the statistics and the data? And remember, they're going to look at what the cost savings are. They're going to be looking at how to make these decisions, right? What's the risk? What's our exposure to risk, correct? So what about senior management's commitment, employee involvement? Those senior managers want employees to come to work and go to home the exact same way that they arrived, right? But they've got to be on the same page. You have to have participation at all levels. If you do a top-down approach, most likely you're going to find other levels or other pockets of people that maybe aren't on the same page. Cindy, would you say that we've both heard that in trainings? And we've been told that before?
Yeah, when we talk about the simplest of policy changes, we see heads either nodding for or against, and their nod has a direct relationship to how they feel management is dialed in. If they feel management's going to support a policy change, then they're on board. If they feel like they're going to be met with resistance, even hostility from management, that's not something that we can do. We can't be effective if we do that. Then they know that they're not going to be able to move forward with a policy change that matters. So, you know, management and the perception of management with the rest of the workers is really key in safety.
It is. And, you know, one thing I do see over and over again when people will share or they'll give information, especially sometimes with the awards, what we'll see or we'll read or we'll hear is how every level has been involved and how every level has totally adopted thoughts and processes. And so I see a common theme where they've been able to educate, communicate, and work together across the departments and the different areas and the different levels to be successful. And so, you know, safety is not proprietary. I always tell people, and this is probably my biggest thing, is you can steal. You know, this is legal to steal. And I always say, what do other people in industry do? I always say, don't reinvent the wheel. It's not worth the time and effort sometimes to start from scratch. You know other people in your industry. You may belong to different organizations with like people in your industry. What ideas can you implement and use? What templates are there out there, right? Ask somebody else for best practices. Doesn't mean it's always going to work for you, but it's going to give you some really good ideas to draw from. And sometimes when you start at the top and you think, I think this is going to work, what have other people found, right? What do other people know that has been successful for them? You may say, gosh, this is a great idea, but this, you know, it doesn't quite work for us. Let's tweak it here and let's tweak it there. But they gave you a really good bones. They gave you a really good structure. So I always say ask others because they're going to have some really good ideas, and this is where stealing is legal. In fact, it was kind of funny. Right after we started doing our webinars, and we've been doing webinars all along, but right after everybody kind of got, you know, stay-at-home orders and nobody was really traveling and people weren't going to conferences, we had the ability to easily ramp up some of the things we were doing into more training like we've always been doing. And I sent out some flyers, and when someone said, I already stole this and shared this because we didn't know what we were going to do. And I'm like, you know what? That's the best compliment ever. We're glad to share. You know, our goal is how do we help each other? And I think anybody in the same industry wants the same things for you as well. So, you know, safety is not proprietary. You've got to be flexible, right? I said that a minute ago. You've got to be flexible. One size may not fit all. So remember, a large company, Cindy, can you move the slide for me? You know, remember this, one company that's really large might not work for a company that's a really small company. And a one-size-fits-all approach doesn't maybe always work. What if you've got different fleets or different departments or different people doing different things? You need to really look at that and determine, does it fit everybody, okay? And again, look to other organizations. Do you have a safety committee? Do you have a safety ambassador? And I've got news for you. It's great to have a safety committee, but if they have absolutely no authority and they're just meeting, but nothing happens, eventually they're going to quit telling you the ideas and the suggestions and what they hear, and they're not going to be your ambassador. So it's great to have a safety committee, but they also need to have a little bit of authority or suggestions or ideas that you actually hear and that they're a part of the process, because they will be your ambassadors. You need those safety leaders also, and again, as I said, try and try again. A couple things to think about. Hold yourself accountable first, right? If I'm not doing it, why am I not doing it? And why will everybody do it if I'm not? Know how safety really works. You need to lead safety as if your family worked there. Where would you want your family working, and how would you want your employees to be treated, and what policies? Have a strategy, have a game plan. You can't just show up and say, well, I guess we're going to figure it out as we go. Have a strategy, have a game plan. Cindy, I'm going to have you move on and tell us a few more points.
Okay, so when it comes to your program, your policy, and your goals, you know, we've talked about the buy-in from upper management, and that is definitely a really key part. But if you don't have accountability, your program's not going to work. We all need accountability. We all need checks and balances. We all need some system in place for when a risky situation occurs. And, you know, one of the things that one of the transportation leaders shared with us in a webinar last week was the importance of understanding that a lot of times when something unsafe has occurred, it wasn't because the employee decided directly to be risky. It had something to do with not paying attention, being distracted, being fatigued, being worn out, not being focused on the task, not being focused on the safety aspects. So, you know, a lot of times these are consequences of unintentional unsafe practices, and you want to keep that in mind when you develop an accountability model. You want to, you know, give people some grace, but also some discipline and some best practice for going forward and some redirection. These are really key parts of making sure that your program works and that your goals and your policies have accountability measures.
That's a very good point, Cindy. You know, some final thoughts here, and we're going to be wrapping up in a minute. Cindy and I have a few more final thoughts that we're going to share, but, you know, seek input. I cannot stress enough that every time I've been to trainings or I've been to conferences and I talk to people, their biggest issue is somebody not hearing them. Somebody is not listening. Ask others, right? Before you make significant changes, you know, ask, consult, make improvements. Don't assume we can't do better. And set aside time to discuss the safety issues with the goal of identifying ways to improve, right? If you're going to have a meeting, make something happen as a result of it, or nobody's going to come to meetings, right? How about priorities, Cindy?
Absolutely. You know, safety is either the priority or it's not, and there are no do-overs, as we say in safety. There are no second chances. When an incident occurs, there's would have, could have, should have, there's 20/20 vision. All those things are great, but they don't save the incident from occurring. So safety needs to be your priority, whether it's during COVID-19 or beyond, whether we are faced with more stress and reactionary distractions, whether we're more fatigued right now as a result, or during times of more normalcy. Safety needs to be the priority, and the way to best dial in with that is to make sure that you're communicating your safety priorities with your employees, and that you're also sounding a box for them, that you are a safe place to go, a safe place to communicate their concerns. and what they're seeing as well. And I think we talked about this, but this slide enunciates the fact that you want safety to be forward-thinking. You want to be getting ahead of and mitigating safety issues rather than cleaning up afterwards.
Absolutely. You want to think forward, Cindy, right? You want to think about what could be occurring, what might be happening. How do I get to where I want to be instead of where I've always been, right? Isn't that a good way to think about it?
Absolutely.
What about a commitment to safety? What is your commitment? Do you have a company-wide commitment? And it's really important that you communicate the why. Why? Your employees need to be a part of your process, and they need to understand what you're doing, right? You need that as your core value. Safety is non-negotiable. It needs to be a part of your core value, right? So let's just wrap up here for a minute and talk about a few things about, driver safety. It's unlimited. It can be, Cindy gave you multiple ways, and I think Cindy could probably go on for an hour at all the different ways that you can actually make driver safety a part of your safety culture. She might even be able to go on longer than that because driver safety is unlimited, right? You're laughing, but it's true.
Well, I am, because I think you're touching on the point that I can do a lot of talking, Lisa. I think that's what I'm hearing you say, is that I have a lot to think about and talk about and share. But it's absolutely true. We have multiple resources available for you through our website. Our trainings, our webinars, our recorded webinars are all there for you to access. And, another thing we haven't mentioned, Lisa, is from time to time an employer feels stuck and they call us up and we set up a meeting with them and we talk about some of the things that maybe they haven't thought about when it relates to their safety culture. And we can do that, right, Lisa? We can do that for employers that are on the call with us today.
We do. We enjoy doing that because we know that you may feel like you don't know next steps. What are some ideas? What are some suggestions? There have been times, too, where somebody will say, I'm looking for some ideas, and I can say, I know somebody you should talk to. And I always make the introduction for the two because somebody else has done some really great best practices, and they are somebody that can keep sharing ideas that will help them. We hear that a lot. And you know what? Start small. You can't eat the elephant. We've all heard the expression, eat one piece of the elephant at a time, right? You have to start small, and you have to, grab one piece and then another piece, but have that plan and look about it. And, communication, right? If you aren't communicating, everybody's not on the same plan with you. I don't know about you, Cindy, but I know that communication, I think, is probably one of the most important, components when we talk about being successful in what we do.
It is, and it's a challenge, whether we're talking about safety or not. We're all very busy, but communication is really a key to having a successful program and to having successful results through human performance.
Absolutely. Here is our contact information. You are more than welcome to email Cindy or I at any time. We hope you will join us on future webinars. Our goal is that you'll continue to get safety sound bites and you'll continue to get safety information and resources, again, all at no cost to you to make your workforce and your workplace and our roadway safer. And so if there's any other ideas and suggestions, we are actually going to be adding, I think Cindy might have mentioned that a minute ago at the very beginning, that we are going to be adding a few more things. We do offer the 3- and 4-hour trainings that are also online. Our goal is that we can continue to support you now and in the future. So we thank you for joining us. Cindy, do you have any other closing thoughts?
Not at all. I would just recommend that our next webinar is on work zones. So feel free to go ahead and register for that. I'll be sending you a follow-up email that covers some of the things that we discussed, as well as includes some attachments. We have a really good attachment on best practices. We have something on incident reporting that I think you'll find interesting and engaging and relevant. So I'll be sharing some of those things with you in the next day or two. So thank you. Thanks for being with us, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Have a safe day. Thank you, everybody. Vina, anything to add?
I do have here, Deborah Milford asked, how do you get leaders to care about safety?
Good question.
Deborah, that's a great question. I'll answer it, Cindy, and you may have another couple points too, but I still go back to communication. If they don't have the information, how can they be a part of the solution? That's a great process. But again, if you're frustrated, if you approach it with a sense of, hey, we're in this together, my goal is to reduce our risk. My goal is to reduce, costs. These are some suggestions. These are some ideas. I think communication is probably the most important tool that you have, and statistics and data will help them. And being able to put a dollar sign on it is also beneficial. Any other points you have, Cindy?
I do. I was just thinking, Lisa, about your latest blog entry. You know, I don't know if you're familiar, Deborah, and everybody else who's still on the line with us. There is a Lisa's blog called No Safety, No Crashes that you can link to from our website. I'll include some of that information in the follow-up as well. But I think in your latest
good point.
Blog point in particular, you're really speaking to management and some of the things that need to be kept in mind. That particular one is within regard to COVID-19, but I would say that a lot of your blogs are with management in mind, wouldn't you say, Lisa? And so those can be a good tool to start a conversation, to share with leadership. You know, anytime we have a really engaging statistic that we think will change the dial, we like to share that in just bits and pieces with you, either through the blog or through an article, so that we're not bombarding you with statistics that will mean nothing to you, but maybe giving you something that you can use with management.
It is a great point. And also, too, what you just said a minute ago is those sound bites. I think it's really important that you as a safety leader, safety supervisor, department head, that you do a really good job of continuously communicating upward, too. You may be communicating downward, but when you communicate upward in a positive manner, and you don't want to overwhelm them with so much information at once, but when you're communicating the positives as well as the negatives in a really great way in those small sound bites, they're going to continue to hear you. They're going to continue to see what you're working on and why it's important, and I think that's really helpful for them.
You know, Deborah, it's a really great question, and it's probably one I'm going to continue to ponder this afternoon, because I think it is an approach that we encourage but can sometimes overlook in our day-to-day. The need for management to have continuous and ongoing awareness and education is every bit as important as the workers and the drivers that we are trying to keep safe. So I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you so much. And you know, hopefully we will be able to give you some of those tools that can help you with those conversations.
Vina, any other questions, or are we going to wrap up with the survey at the very end?
Yes, we're going to wrap it up. One last comment. I just thought I'd let you ladies know. Tommy Moreno says, you two should have your own TV show. You ladies are great. The message across. Great job, as always. And it was
Tommy. Thank you, Tommy.
Great webinar. Thank you, Lisa and Cindy. Thank you, everyone else who attended today. Remember, you can check out our upcoming webinars on our website. Please, as you exit out today, please complete the brief survey. This helps us with future webinars. With that, this concludes the webinar. Have a good day and stay safe.
Thank you, Vina. Thank you, Lisa. Thanks, Tommy, and everybody else on the line.